Tremolos.
There we go.
Awesome, man. So, this week we are talking about something that I don't do a lot of, but when I actually do it, I really enjoyed. Well, funk.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, well, I really don't enjoy it.
No, I actually really like it because it really challenges me on my timing. We're going over 5 essential funk chords this week. And one of the biggest things that I love about this lesson in particular in these 5 chords is it shows you how to make chords out of things that you already know if you know your open 5 fundamental open major chords.
That's right. And there are a butt ton of resources. I think there's 5 of them or something for you guys to download. So if you're a member, obviously you know where to download those. Make sure you do download them. I think 3 of them are for the song that we just played, which is on the members area, in the members area. There's a song called Don't Sweat It. That's what we just played. So if you want to learn that song, it's a good little challenge. It's not too bad, but I know when I was learning it there, I had a couple spots. I was like, some tough little transitions here.
Yeah, some tricky stuff. Also, some tricky things with, on purpose, I put in swing fill, like shuffle fill, and then straight fill. To make you really work on your timing and switching gears really quickly. So.
And obviously for funk, timing's incredibly important. But make sure you download those resources and at least download the PDF that we're going to be kind of going through right now. And
all that's on the PDF is the 5 chords, but I'm going to teach them to you. It's good to learn them, but it's really important to understand exactly where they're coming from too and how they're made. So you can start exploring other funk chords on your own, or any type of, any style of chords. They're all the same. So.
Right. Okay. Do you want to jump into it?
I do. The first chord is the chord that I think of when I think of funk, and it's just a 9 chord, or dominant 9 chord. And you've probably seen this before if you've been around a guitar for any amount of time. And I know people are going to ask about tone for this lesson, so I'll go ahead and touch on that as I go through this chord. Strat, to me, is the ultimate funk guitar, and I always use the second position when 90% of the time I use the second position when I'm doing this. So.
Why?
Because it gets quacky and balky like a chicken. It's very narrow, lots of highs, and it sticks out, and it's almost like a percussion instrument, like hi-hats or something like that, where you're harmonizing what the drummer is doing.
One of my favorite positions for funk is actually middle position.
Middle?
That's my favorite.
Let's see what the difference is. See, to me, that's a little fat.
It's mid-range, yeah.
But it depends on the context of what band you're playing in, right? If you're not playing with the keyboard, that might be better.
Interesting, eh?
It just depends. So this chord, I'll show you how to make it first. There's 2 variations on here I have for you. Like the full tilt one is this one, and I always find this one a struggle if I haven't used it in a long time because it bars the top 3 strings with your 3rd finger. And we're playing a D9, a D dominant 9 chord here. So the 3rd finger gets the 5th fret of the G, B, and high E strings, which can be difficult. And you slide up a lot in funk, so that makes it even more of a challenge, right? So that's like step 1 for this chord, is getting used to collapsing that finger down, breaking it over, and hitting all 3 of those strings. Then, this is actually not an easy chord to make and have it sound really good. So your 2nd finger goes on the 5th fret of the A string. So you have to really come down, arch it, and come down to the very top of it, or the very tip of your finger. Let's play that D note, that's the root. Because if you don't come down to the very top of it, it's going to mute the 3rd of the chord, which is with your index finger right here on the 4th fret of the D string. So you have to be really aware of that finger arching over and then this one laying flat to get all 3 of those. Now, if that's a little bit difficult for you, or if you don't want that note on top, which is the 5th of the chord, you can just play this version of it. It's a little bit easier in general. It's definitely easier to slide. It's easier because you don't have to make that bar, and it's a little bit easier, since you're not making that bar, to arch that 2nd finger over.
That's the version I learned back in the day, that version of the chord.
Yeah, that's the first version of that I learned too. But this chord, all it is based off of this C major chord.
Okay.
So.
Right.
And a lot of people know a C7 chord.
Oh,
So you're just modifying the notes to fit what would be a C dominant 9 chord, which all it is root 3rd, 5th, just like a major chord. But then you also have a lowered 7th, and then the 9th in there with it. This chord, this version with your 3rd finger, barring all those notes, gets every note in the chord. Root, 3rd, 5th, lowered 7th, and 9th, which is really nice if you want that thick of a voice. And you can even get away That sounds fine in the context of a jam track when you're playing with a bass or in a band. That's going to sound fine too. So either way, that's what I think of when I think of a funk chord. And sliding up, just get used to doing that with all of your chords if you're playing funk. That's something you have to do. Just start 1 fret below, hit it, and slide up right after.
What I was doing when you were playing that chord, I was playing it like...
Oh yeah, just the top 4 notes.
So I just removed the root.
Yeah, and like when you're playing guitar, like getting rid of the root in the 5th is usually the first things to go. Like I did, in this context, I do like the 5th on top just because of the way it sounds for the song. It sounds a little bit darker. Like even that, but then the same argument can be made just playing the top 3 strings.
Absolutely. And it does fit in the context with the chord you're playing next.
Yeah.
Is a smaller chord with just the top 3 strings
exactly.
too, right?
That brings me a nice segue, Andrew. Ooh. Okay, now if you know your caged sequence at all, you have your C and then your A for your D chord. I'm just playing a D chord with my A shape, right? So A major bar chord shape, but I'm playing a D chord. And that's the chord that this next one uses. It's a D7, it's a voicing for a D7, but it only uses the top 4 strings of the guitar, which is great for funk, because generally you kind of want to stay away from the lower strings and let the bass and keyboards fill those in for funk. So all is an A7 chord, and if you know an A major, if you put your pinky down here, that's an A7. So all we're doing is making that with the index finger barring all of the notes for the regular A chord, then putting our second finger down for the 7th of the chord and just moving that up to where it's a D. Right. So when I'm trying to play this particular shape, you can move any of these shapes you're going over in this lesson anywhere around the fretboard. They're all movable. So when I think about this chord, for a root note location, I either think about this D on the G string, or I think about 2 frets above the lowered 7th, which is the root note. It's a D up there. So when I'm trying to hit the right note for a D, I either think, here's a D note right there for the root, or there's one right here. Right. Yeah. But it's kind of the same concept as far as barring multiple strings. You have to get used to that first. And that's a really good skill to have, just be able to move your A shape anywhere you want with a bar. And then start to tweak things around, like there's a 7th here, lowered 7th. If I wanted to make this a major 7th, I would just have to put it up, that lowered 7th up 1 fret to major 7th. And all of a sudden, I'm in jazz land.
I was just gonna say, you just went into jazz land.
Exactly, so. Just understanding how your fundamental open major chords can be manipulated and understanding how chords are made is like my favorite part of this lesson. So that's the first 2.
Nice.
The second one.
Before you
move on.
the
second one.
Before you
Third,
move on.
I can't count it. Before we move on, yes.
We did fix the question issue.
Okay.
It's all fixed and good. So if you guys do want to submit questions, you guys can go ahead and do that, and we'll answer them at the end.
All right, doesn't have to be on funk, can be on anything. Doesn't matter.
Just letting you guys know.
The next one is based off of a D major chord. So if you know your open D, that's where we're getting this chord shape from. Now, if you don't know how to make a D7 real quick, I'll show you how to do that. This is a D note right here with my 3rd finger. We also have a D note in the low D string, right? The open one. Right. Now, to make a D major 7 chord, you will lower this to the 7th scale degree by just making a bar right there. Again, jazz land. But for funk land, we want a dominant 7th chord. That means that 7th needs to go down or be lowered by 1/2 step. So you end up with this D7 shape. And that's the shape we're going to use to move around, and it doesn't have a root note in it, so it can be kind of tricky to visualize where you need to play it. So, in this particular case for the song, we need a G7, okay? So we're going to use that same shape, and we're going to put it up to where our index finger is on the 6th fret, and then our other 2 fingers are on the 7th fret. But the root note that I would kind of reference would be right here with my pinky. So this D shape, right? Just open D shape. Moving it up to where we are on a G right there, and then lowering it 2 frets. And that is a G7 with no root. Now you could play like this with a root.
Yep.
It's a little overkill for funk, I think.
I would agree.
So that's another really good chord to get down to understand how it's made. Major 7, dominant 7th, and then just move it anywhere you want. Like if you wanted to make an A dominant 7, you would need to move this to where you could visualize that A in the D chord shape. And that will put your index finger on the 8th fret and your other 2 fingers on the 9th fret.
Nice.
So that's the next one. The last chord that we're going to go over, I believe it's the last chord. Let's see. No, it's not the last chord. My mistake. 4th chord is a D7 sus 4. Now, if you know, and we're going to build it right off of the D shape that we just went through. So if you know a D major, maybe you've played this chord, right? Just a D sus 4. Very poppy, kind of folky, right? You can do the exact same thing, only with a 7 chord, a D7. So same exact shape that we just played. And then just sus that 4, because this is the 3rd of the chord right here with your, on this 2nd fret of a high E string. That's the 3rd of the chord. So if you move that up a half step, you get a 4th scale degree. And if you do it with a 7th chord, you get a 7 sus 4, or dominant 7 sus 4. So you can do the exact same thing, move this up to where you're playing a D. So we think of your D on your B string right there. Then make the 7th chord. This is just kind of a passing chord, but it is important for the feel and the sound of the song. So start 1 fret below maybe, slide up. And it's just there for a second. But if you understand how chords are made like this, you can take any 7th chord that you know. For example, if you know A7, this A7,
yeah,
and you just raise the 3rd scale degree up. And you can do that anywhere. So what chord we were making a G7 sus 4. Let's do it with an A shape. There's a G7 right there. Then just raise the 3rd. And when you know how chords are made like this, building and manipulating your fundamental 5 open major chord shapes and then the 3 fundamental open minor chord shapes, it gets really easy as soon as you kind of get past the initial learning curve of it.
Right.
The last one, seriously this time the last one, if you know bar chords, you already know this one, but you may not have thought about it like this. All it is, it's the top 3 notes of an E major bar chord shape. So if you have your open E and you make a bar chord out of it, there's an A chord in this song in the intro, just for a little while.
Yeah, that's right.
But instead of playing the whole thing, because funk kind of wants to be a little bit thinner sounding, a little bit more percussive, just play the top 3 notes of that. And instead of making the whole bar chord, all you have to do is bar the first top 2 notes on the 5th fret of the E and B strings. And then your 2nd finger can come play the 6th fret of the G string, and that's all you need to play.
Now that's just a little triad inversion, right?
Yeah, all it is first inversion. So the 3rd is in the bass, then the 5th, and the root is on top.
Yeah.
The roller coaster, right? That's the sound that I associate with this chord. Maybe I do all 4 for the bottom.
Yeah.
For that particular song, but and you can slide up to that. It sounds great.
It's interesting because there's no like flavor elements.
Yeah.
You know, like no any 7 anything.
There's no 7, no nothing, and that's I think a lot of times in funk you can get by with that, especially if you're playing with like a keyboard player or something that's already filling in that harmony.
Right. That makes sense. Very nice. So that's all 5 chords, right?
That's all 5 chords, and they may be a little bit weird. You may have to think about the chord shapes you already know a little bit differently at first, but really press through that and kind of form those new pathways in your brain. And as soon as you start picking out chords like that, you're going to be able to see a chord diagram of a new chord and be like, oh, okay, this one is using a C chord to play a major 7 shape. Right? Or Danny's taking this note, it's a root, and lowering it 1/2 step.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
It's going to be a lot easier for you.
Nice.
If you actually dig in, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we do have a question here. While you guys are continuing to get questions in, I want to give you guys a chance. I'm going to show you a little trick.
This is awesome.
So I didn't come up with this. I learned this from not very well-known guitar player, but I'm sure lots of other people do it. Okay, you have to have a Stratocaster. So if you have a Stratocaster,
Or anything with a 5-way switch close to your...
yes, you need tone pots
Yeah.
for. You could probably do it on other guitars.
Yeah.
But it's not quite going to be the same. The trick is, okay, so we're going to take the 2 tone pots on a Stratocaster, right? And we're going to take the neck one, the one that does the neck. Now, the bridge one isn't always wired to just the bridge. Sometimes it's wired to both. Sometimes this is not wired. It doesn't matter. This one's cranked. This one's all the way back. So when we're up here, sounds like we're underwater.
Yeah.
And when we're back here, it's like an
super
ice
bright,
pick, right? Okay. So what you do is you take your pinky and you hook the 5-way switch. Okay. And what you can do is you can actually create a wah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strum with my thumb, and I'm going to move the switch at the same time. You ready? It's pretty cool, right?
And we have a challenge for you if you have a Strat.
Oh, what was the challenge?
You can't make a wah face. Right now. I couldn't do it.
Okay, that's right. The hard thing about doing this, and it's the same with using a real wah, but it's even worse with this, is that when you try to do it, you're going to go like this with your mouth. Everybody does it.
I can't do it. I start twitching in my face. I have a hard enough time with a wah pedal not doing that. So
Good luck. You can try, but it's not going to replace a wah necessarily because you have to use your thumb and you're doing some kind of weird stuff. But it's a really fun party trick, and you can use it sometimes. You know, if you're like.
I can't even not do it when Andrew does it. I'm like,
I actually think I may have done it there. Anyways, there you go. If you guys have any questions about that, let me know because. I don't know. It's kind of a weird, cool thing that not a lot of people do.
I've seen some players that play tellies flip their plate around so their tone knob is here, and they do wah with their guitar, which is freaking amazing. It's great. They one less pedal.
That's right. That's a fairly common thing telly players do. Okay, we got a couple questions in here. Let's see here. First one is from Leza KDN. Hi, I see the G7 and the G7 sus4 don't have any root notes. Does this happen often, a chord with no root notes? Thank you.
The longer you play, unfortunately, the more that happens. The reason for that is if you're playing in a context, like in a band context, you don't need the root as a guitar player, or sometimes as a piano player usually gets a root. But the first things to go are usually the fifth and the root.
Yeah.
If you're playing solo guitar, it changes a little bit because there's no context for the root notes, so you're gonna have more root notes, I think, if you're playing solo. But if you're playing with a band, a lot of times, and that's one thing I struggled with for a long time. On some songs, especially like hardcore jazz stuff or big band tunes, that I really have to think about it and put in extra time to work out voicings for songs. Because when the chords are flying by and they're just crazy extensions on there, you can't hit every note as a guitar player. You just have to choose your battles and play some notes and move on, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. The big thing is, like, I've noticed with a bass player, sometimes you also playing a root note when the bass player is also playing a root, it can just be really redundant.
Yeah.
You know, and you can kind of sometimes just make room. The audience is gonna know what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question here. This one is from Daryl S. Hi, Nate and Andrew. I'm working on lead technique and learning the fretboard. I've also started the new improvisation course with Jacob Weens. Nice.
Oh, awesome.
Right now, when making up melodies to jam tracks, I've been stuck in only one scale shape per jam track. Moving forward, what things can I do to broaden my range, like using multiple shapes, and basically start learning to navigate more of the fretboard for improvisation and playing other songs? Thanks.
Looper pedals are really good for this, I think. Having just like a really simple change, like maybe a 1 to a 5. Okay. And then getting used to, let me unmute my guitar here. That's the fifth, so hitting the fifth over the 5 chord. And then hitting hitting the roots over the one chord, the ones over the one chord, is a great thing to start with. And then once you get really good at that, you can start changing up major pentatonic scales, maybe over the 1 and the 5. So maybe you're going, that implies the 5, like the D major chord. And then the G major pentatonic implies the 5. Then after that, like if you're working on, say, a G major scale, major scales are great for getting your coordination down and like learning the actual scale, but you need to start picking the notes of the chord over which you're playing out a little more. So if you're playing over, play a G chord. I'll play a D chord. Start working on pulling the notes that are in the chord over which you're playing out. So like, I thought of this G major arpeggio as I was going through that scale while Andrew was playing the G, and then as he switched to the D, I started thinking about this C major chord shape only for a D, and now you can see even see the D in there. Instead of just going, right? Instead of playing. So that's one big thing, just coming up with, or being aware of what chords you're playing over. And Andrew's approach is more intervallic, so I'll let him talk about that.
It's a little bit different. So I don't actually know I know the chord shapes, but when I'm playing, I'm not thinking about it as much. I will talk about something slightly different from what Nate talked about. When Nate's talking about like choosing your notes, and changing things up melodically. If you just want to span the fretboard more, the cool thing is that the pentatonics and major scale and minor scale and stuff, they're all just connected and they just go all the way. And a lot of times people have a hard time just breaking out of that first like shape. And so if you have, what key were you playing? You were in G, right? I'm not going to play in G because it's annoying for me, but I'm going to play in like C major. So if Nate plays a C major, right? So I've got all those notes in that one spot. If you play an A minor, it's the same thing, right? So I've got that one pentatonic spot, but it gets really dry. And one of the little things that I started doing was just using one movement to get up to the next shape, or using a movement to get down to the next shape over, and just kind of focusing on doing that. So just like exploring the sides on the like a little bit on the outside. I know this is a little different than the intervallic approach we talked about, but I do think it's important. So when Nate plays like an A minor, I can go. So I'm in shape 1 right now. But if I want to, you can see I'm in shape 2 right now, right? Back into 1. And if I want to go down, so you can kind of move back and forth between them, and eventually you can actually do that around the whole fretboard. It doesn't matter. And then the intervallic approach is different. Basically, all you're going to do is you're just going to use your ear. And I am not thinking in the intervallic way where I'm going like, okay, root 3rd, root 7. Like I'm not thinking about it that way. Some guys are really good at that. But if Nate were to play, if you just play any chord progression, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to pick
C major.
Sure. Okay. I'll just pick a melody and I'll just use my ear and follow my ear to try and make something sound good. Go for it. So it's a little bit different. It's more like thinking, I play a note, I hear how it sounds with Nate underneath it, and then I make a decision where I'm going to go to the next one. And I'm doing it more that way instead of like analyzing. There's players on both sides and on many other sides that have just made complete careers out of it.
If I play like that, I think one of 2 ways. I either think, okay, I want to hear this scale degree over what's going on here right now.
Okay. Yep.
Or I think I want to hear this interval away from the notes that I'm on. So
right. Okay.
Yeah. Which is kind of essentially at the end of the day, I guess it's the same thing.
They end up in the same place. The only thing is like one's more of one's more prone to mistakes, which is my way. One's more prone to like oopsies, and one's a little bit more analytical. So it's a lot easier to kind of understand if you break it down that way and arrive at it. My problem was more that I didn't have someone teach me before, so I kind of learned the thing. So then I had to like reverse engineer it, which actually was it's a little bit challenging. I have a hard time kind of wrapping my head around it. I hope that kind of helps. Feel free to like email Nate or myself if you want to talk about it more. Improvising is like such a broad topic, especially when you start getting into like improvising in different genres. So I'd be happy, and I'm sure Nate would be happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, and that's like the goal for the rest of my life is to work on that. So
absolutely, yeah. So that's it for questions.
Cool.
Let's see if there's any more in chat. Here's one. Okay, this is from Mathachu. Are any of the tips provided here useful with acoustic? I have no idea when I'll eventually get an electric.
For sure, like understanding how the chords are made, for sure. As far as playing funk on an acoustic, it depends what your goals are. And if you want to I would do it.
Oh yeah.
If you're the kind of person who just wants to play open chords on acoustic, not get into bar chords or up the neck, then it might not be so useful for you as far as the actual physical, actual getting the shapes on the fretboard. But having the knowledge is always going to help. And I think you can play all of these chords on acoustic. I mean, I do it all the time. So it might be a little bit more physically challenging, but that's the case with anything on the acoustic, even if it's a C chord. It's going to be more challenging on the acoustic. So. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, even if you listen to like those crazy fingerstyle guys who play cool stuff on acoustic, they're using a lot of similar shapes, right, all over the place. So it's definitely useful to just know the shape. Yeah, I agree. Okay, well that's, I think, going to be it. We were going to play something, and it was a funk blues.
Yeah. Let's do funk blues in A. Take it one more time.